Since you obviously intend to leech off Robin Masters for the rest of
Now you hold it. And that goes for you too.
A charming, happy-go-lucky private investigator based in Hawaii seems to get by just with a little help from his friends and the largesse of a mystery writer while living under the icy glare of a martinet estate manager. He's a TV detective, either named after a gun or an ice cream.
Sunsets in Hawaii really are different.
Though on reflection, the ice cream probably wouldn't last that long in the heat. Magnum P.I.
These are the guys that say they know you.
I've never seen these men before in my life.
Magnum P.I. ran on CBS from 1980 to 1988 and detailed the adventures of Private
I prefer to be called private investigator.
Private Investigator Thomas Magnum, an ex-naval intelligence officer, Navy SEAL, and Vietnam vet.
You threw it away to be a private eye.
Investigator, and I didn't throw anything away.
He's a good private investigator. He did almost win an award that one time, but he's not doing that well financially.
Well, I'm a little tapped out right now.
Now there's a news flash.
He does live on a fabulous Hawaiian estate and drives a Ferrari, but then both of those are owned by a rarely and barely seen super rich novelist, Robin Masters, for whom Thomas Magnum does security work as required.
I knew letting you stay at the guest house would pay off someday, despite what Higgins says.
Higgins, the manager of the Masters estate, tries to keep Magnum on the straight and narrow. For much of the series, Higgins wages a series of petty battles and negotiations with Magnum, often over the latter's cavalier use of the estate and its amenities.
You continue to drive a car that you do not own, do not rent, and do not even wash. And while you were driving that car, it suffered $2,700 worth of damage.
Magnum often leans on his friends for help in his investigations. TC runs a helicopter charter business, while club manager Rick has links to the underworld. So that sounds like a setup for a fairly standard detective show, just one set on Hawaii.
$200 a day is one hell of a lot of money.
Not if you only work 10 days a year, it isn't.
Oh, all right, $200 a day.
A lot of the time that's exactly what the series is. Somebody hires Magnum to track down somebody or investigate something or other, but then there are the other times where it's a comedy or a serious drama, a thriller, a war movie. And then there are the times where the series delved into the realms of fantasy, spirituality, or the supernatural. 8 years is a long run for any program, and Magnum P.I. managed to offer enough variations on the detective story, along with many forays into the personal lives and history of the regular characters.
Nice set of wheels you got here. Where'd you steal her?
What makes you think she isn't mine? No.
It's not a serialized story, but it does feature character arcs and has a large coterie of semi-regular characters to populate the episodes.
Mom, I'm gonna miss Magnum.
It's gonna run for the next 8 years, okay? I think you got a little time.
Over the course of 8 seasons, we learn a lot about Thomas Magnum, a fair bit about Theodore Calvin, a little about Wright, and of course, way too much about the exploits of one Jonathan Quayle Higgins.
Your case reminds me of Mandalay in '48 when Burma gained its independence.
Higgins, please, I do not want another one of your travel logs.
In Magnum P.I., Hawaii and its people are also a character. But is it Hawaii or Hawaii? Well, it's both.
Sir, a Mai Tai, a Chi-Chi, or a Blue Hawaii?
Heathens like me have traditionally pronounced the place as Hawaii.
If you don't, sunsets in Hawaii can be depressing.
Or, round my way, Hawaii, which is not a greeting, but a much sought after holiday destination. I'll use it in a sentence. Have you seen our holiday photographs from our marvelous holiday in Hawaii?
I'm here in the islands doing research for the ultimate novel about Hawaii.
Michener wrote a big book on Hawaii.
In the series, there's an attempt to pronounce local names and places much as the people who lived there would.
Even in the Hawaiian sunshine.
So, in the series Magnum P.I. and in this video, you'll hear both Hawaii and Hawaii.
I know what you're thinking, but this time you're wrong.
I mean, there's no prize for spotting the variations other than a lifetime supply of undying contempt, or its cash equivalent, which again is contemptible.
Aloha, partner. Aloha!
Higgins in particular is an expert in Hawaiian culture because Of course he is.
The Almakur is a Hawaiian family god given by the high priest Kalaniʻaupū to his
nephew, King Kamehameha. You already told me that, but that's not the point.
Paliuli Keahikapu was maidservant to Kahivalani before the prince's sudden and unexpected demise.
Magnum P.I. in early years would shy away from showing Hawaii as all high-rise hotels along the beach. It would show other aspects, seedy clubs and bars, Little Saigon, Chinatown, surfing competitions, the drug trade, and all of Higgins' interminable Anglo-Hawaiian societies looking to cure insomnia.
Higgins. You okay? It's me, Magnum.
Zeus, Apollo, kill.
Must be a reflex action.
Magnum P.I. was unique at the time for showing Vietnam veterans who were not completely damaged emotionally by their time in the war. Thomas, Magnum, TC and Rick weren't immune from reliving the worst times of their tours, but were functioning people. That said, many of the folks they knew from their time in the war did have lingering issues that they were dealing with.
But I am not suffering from delayed stress, and I'm not Looney Tunes, but...
Thomas Sullivan Magnum had resigned his commission from the Navy to become a private investigator based on the island of Oahu. Magnum likes to keep fit and loves to paddle about on his surf ski to the point where he competes in local competitions. He also plays the saxophone, just. He loves wearing goofy masks and always knows where his best friend is, a rubber chicken.
I know it's hard to believe, but even in paradise it's possible to have a bad day.
Magnum often narrates episodes, either talking about the ups and downs of living in paradise, or imparting his knowledge of investigation techniques, or even just addressing the audience at home directly.
You're probably wondering why I wasn't going to the police.
He's fairly self-aware, though he doesn't reflect too hard on all the leaning he does on his long-suffering friends. If you were Magnum's best bud and you just bought a new truck, he'd be eyeing it and thinking to himself, I'll have that.
I told you I wasn't the one to fix your old wash tub, but you still owe me $50 for the spark plugs.
You see, I'll need your van.
Magnum will take on all manner of cases during the course of the series run. Security work. Sometimes he's finding somebody who's gone missing. At other times he's trying to solve a crime or a murder. There are an awful lot of people being killed in Hawaii.
Oh my God!
Early seasons would often revolve around more tongue-in-cheek comedic capers in between the horrific crimes. If an episode revolved around a Vietnam veteran in trouble, it would be a totally serious and relatively sensitive show. Occasionally, Magnum does a favor for Robin Masters as a general security consultant, which can sometimes take him away from Hawaii. Sometimes things hit closer to home, with Magnum not having a specific client, as the action would revolve around somebody close to Magnum.
And once nature sets its course, you can't do anything to stop it.
You can if you're British.
Particularly in the middle of the show's run, there were several episodes to feature Magnum in fewer scenes in favor of a story revolving around one of the show's other characters, mainly either Higgins or TC, and on occasion Rick.
Higgins, I have to talk to you. Don't hang up. Higgins?
Tom Selleck had been floating around for a while, someone with star quality who everybody thought could carry a series, except nothing he appeared in took off. He was a space shuttle booster filled with lead. He'd starred in several pilots and had well-received turns in the Rockford Files as a slick private detective. However, at the time, casting Selleck in the lead role of a TV series was basically the kiss of death for any hope of a series order.
That is something we are going to find out.
As Magnum, Selleck is heroic, but also downtrodden. Happy-go-lucky, thoughtful, not trying to screw the pants off every woman in Hawaii, but he also counts an awful lot on his friends, really abusing his friendships most of the time. Magnum is that friend who's always borrowing money.
TC, it's Magnum.
Aha!
Always asking for a lift and always imposing on you for favors. He's a bit like Auntie Beryl, except instead of driving somebody else's Ferrari, she drives somebody else's screen-used Batmobile.
She was my aunt.
Magnum is a charmer and has a good handle on this detective lark, though he only occasionally lets himself get involved. For most of the series, he seems content with his lot in life, as he shares his inner monologue with viewers.
I know what you're thinking.
He's also terminally broke, sliding by, and it seems usually in hock with his friends.
Yeah, and you call me because I know you're broke.
I'll give you gas money.
His buddies accumulate IOUs faster than a long-distance pilot accumulates air miles. What?
I do have a couple hundred here, I think. I just got paid.
Squiggly wigglies. Man, where did you get this from? You didn't do nothing illegal, did you?
No, that's mine. I got it on a case. This case.
In later seasons, Magnum will re-evaluate his life, at one point taking a job as a hotel dick, which disappointingly turns out to be another detective job. He'd also have various folks in the Navy waving officer commissions in his face. He left the Navy as a lieutenant, was brought back a few times given promotions, before always going back into the private investigator game.
I'm serious, TC. I'm going to make it all up to you.
Magnum is a Detroit Tigers fan and prefers to drink Old Dusseldorf beer.
You can drink old Duesenberg anytime.
It's old Dusseldorf, and it's very hard to get on this island.
Selleck was cast as Indiana Jones for Raiders of the Lost Ark, but he couldn't get out of his contract to star in Magnum P.I.
And why do I have to wear this hat?
To keep the sun out of your eyes.
And then the 1980s actor strike delayed production, which would have allowed him to do both roles.
I know what you're thinking. I was thinking it too.
Magnum met his best buddies TC and Rick when they all served together in Vietnam. TC was a chopper pilot and Rick a machine gunner. These days TC operates a helicopter charter business named Island Hoppers, though his main client seems to be one Thomas Sullivan Magnum. Theodore Calvin is a teetotaler, a little league coach, a lover of fine arts.
It was with the San Francisco Ballet. You did the pas de deux from Romeo and Juliet.
Occasional boxer and an athlete. Even with his good-hearted friend Magnum, TC sometimes has to try and talk around Magnum whenever he's become obsessed with something, all the while trying to recoup gas money from Magnum and having to cover the repairs for the inevitable bullet holes.
Don't worry, we're way out of range. I'll take care of that. With what?
He has a failed marriage with 2 children and he works hard to reconnect with during the series run.
That's it, Higgy baby. I've had it with these mangy pothounds.
Roger E. Mosley wasn't originally interested in moving to Hawaii, but at the time thought that with Selleck's reputation as somebody whose pilots never sold, he'd be back home in a matter of weeks. I really hope he didn't organise an airport pickup.
I'm only the guy that takes care of your bar bills, runs down every license plate and ID number when you need them. That I have your permission to do, huh?
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Those favors are only favors on your terms.
Rick Wright grew up an orphan in the tough part of town, on the fringe of the underworld, and as such has a lot of connections. In Hawaii, he's the club manager of the King Kamehameha Club, and sometimes runs a charter boat. Rick is a Humphrey Bogart wannabe, and is usually Magnum's first port of call for information. Since Rick knows the right people, whether it be in the underworld, or he's got a friend in the police department. If Magnum had had a digital assistant on a cell phone, it would be activated by saying, "Hey, Rick."
Well, you know, Rick, how you're always saying you know people.
So what? Everybody knows somebody.
I mean, know people, like that guy Ice Cube you're always talking about.
Rick hates his real name, Orville. But the only thing worse than being named after one of the Wright brothers is being named after both of them. His full name is Orville Wilbur Richard Wright.
Do you know anything about this guy?
He's left-handed.
Plays golf out at Hanaloa. Hell of a duffer. First name is Fred.
Larry Manetti as Rick would get a few episodes highlighting the character, and when he did, it was often to ruin Rick's life, such as having to deal with his wayward sister, or winning and then subsequently losing the lottery.
Here's looking at you, kid.
Rick's greatest shame, he wasn't allowed to keep a permanent mustache, but then the show would have to be renamed to The Four Mustachiers.
What possible feeble, lame excuse can you have for such a reprehensible act?
Somebody's trying to kill me. Our only clue to him could be this film.
Oh.
And then there's Higgins. Jonathan Quayle Higgins is an ex-British Army Sergeant Major who's now Major Domo to Robin Masters, basically manager of Masters' estate on Hawaii, and in effect Magnum's landlord and sometimes boss.
In fact, Mr. Masters himself has made a very generous donation.
What?
You.
Higgins is a font of knowledge, having been a soldier in several wars, a spy, a mercenary, a diplomat, or anything else the series needs him to be in that week. His backstory would grow to absurd proportions during the run of the series.
My God!
Here's a diagram of the web of intrigue we get to see over the course of the series run. But basically he was the second son of an English duke who was drummed out of the British Army to protect somebody else's honour, and then he enlisted as the poshest private in the trenches. He would rise to Sergeant Major, but he'd also apparently served in every hotspot between World War II and the start of the 1980s. Sometimes as a soldier, other times in intelligence, but why not just go the whole hog and have him on Apollo 16?
You know that, but the rest of the world thinks that you're chairman of the Society for the Preservation of the Trisected Paolo Worm. You wouldn't know a trisected Paolo worm if it bit you. They bite?
It should be said that Higgins was often a bit of a dick, but since he's English, decorum prevents us from implying he's a dick. More accurately, he's a knob.
Higgy baby, the match was not over.
Of course it was over.
He's written as a knob, and then later on, he literally becomes one canonically.
If you're a lord, then how come you weren't an officer in the army?
One is a matter of birth. The other is a matter of choice.
Higgins spends much of the series reminiscing about this, that, or the other, whether he's working on his memoirs, working on his matchstick model of the bridge on the River Kwai, or just recounting a tangentially related anecdote of one of his numerous experiences at an inopportune moment.
I remember a polo pony we had in Gwangju. That was in 48. Or was it 49? No, it was 49, yes.
Higgins starts the series utterly despising Magnum, but would grow to tolerate him over the years. But even then, their animosity would bubble to the surface again and again.
Tennis courts and grounds will be my territory. You'll have the guest house and the car. The tidal pool, I think we could consider a DMZ.
One episode saw their rivalry reach new heights when Magnum and Higgins engaged in the pettiest chicken shit imaginable, with each trying to passively aggressively break the spirit of the other.
Ta-da!
But then Magnum went full on Looney Tunes when he became convinced Higgins was actually Robin Masters.
You're Robin. You are Robin Masters.
John Hillerman's performance of a restrained upper-class Brit, snootier than a snootful of snoot, ties the series together. His received pronunciation accent holds up most of the time. I mean, most of the time.
I beg your pardon.
Which is no mean feat for someone from Texas who usually sounded something more like this.
And I'm not giving up my ice cream parlor that I built with these two hands for nothing or nobody.
Oh, and then there are the lads, two incredibly well-trained Doberman dogs, Zeus and Apollo. As the show opens, the dogs absolutely hate Magnum, but at some point, even he manages to win over the lads.
I remember once on a night patrol in North Africa, we were running out of water and we had to pinch it from a jerry well.
Shut up.
There would eventually be a long list of semi-recurring and returning characters in the series. Higgins' compatriot Agatha would be involved in whatever amateur Anglo-Hawaiian society Higgins was micromanaging into the ground that week.
For the Anglo-Hawaiian Shakespeare Society.
Agatha clearly had a thing for Higgins, even though he could be a right knob.
I know.
You know.
Icepick was a shady underworld character who had been a father figure to Rick growing up. He was often talked about as a scary guy but not seen in early episodes. But later on he would appear quite often, offering assistance but always with a bit of a veiled threat.
And you gotta start dating my daughter Hilda again.
Carol Baldwin was an assistant DA who, depending on the episode, either got Magnum out of trouble or landed him right in it, dragging Magnum into her problems. She'd be played in most of her appearances by Kathleen Lloyd. Most of the time, Magnum and Carol have a brother and sister type relationship. Most of the time.
In fact, I think you're actually jealous.
Jealous? Me?
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii is a dangerous place, with Magnum or one of his friends being horribly injured every few weeks. If they weren't in a vehicular crash or beaten up, then they were shot. I mean, they're shot a lot. Magnum himself has more scar tissue than a knife thrower's practice assistant. Fortunately, there's Doc Eyebolt, who manages to make bullets magically disappear.
I'd get up, but...
Don't you even try.
Lieutenant Tanaka doesn't like Magnum much early on, but would later become a good friend.
Let me try some theories on you.
There's shady Naval Intelligence Officer Buck Green, with whom Magnum has a long history.
Magnum, been a while.
It's Lance.
I guess it's time you and I had a little talk.
In early seasons, Magnum would often lean on McReynolds, or Mac, who worked in Naval Intelligence and had access to the Navy's computers.
Well, okay, but if anybody finds you in here, I'm gonna be walking the shortest plank in the history of the Navy.
He would be succeeded by Lieutenant Commander Maggie Poole, who didn't need as much cajoling into helping out.
Thomas, I don't know how it could have happened.
Both characters were played by actors who, at one point, would be cast in another Don Bellisario-produced series. Mac was killed off roughly around the same time as Jeff McKay was cast in Tales of the Gold Monkey. Jean Bruce Scott similarly disappeared from Magnum while she was a regular on Airwolf. Both would return to Magnum after their respective stints on the other series ended. Except Mac had died, so now there was the other Mac. Jim Bonnick was a conman who looked a lot like Mac, and so Magnum just called him Mac for an easy life.
Well, what's wrong, Magnum? You look like you've seen a ghost.
There were episodes later on which would involve as many of the side characters as they could fit into a 50-minute episode, such as a Mad Mad World-esque treasure hunt.
So you thought I was out of the picture? Well, 2 tons of Detroit steel bouncing off my head or a gaggle of karate screaming old ladies ain't gonna stop Luther Gillis, private investigator.
There would be guest characters that producers loved so much they would bring him back again and again. Most notably, hard-boiled Private Dick, Luther Gillis, who appeared a few times to frustrate Magnum.
Must they watch?
The owner of the estate, Robin Masters, was a mega successful author of thriller novels who lived the jet-set life. He owned multiple estates and vehicles around the world. Apart from the Hawaiian estate, he also had an estate in the UK, where he was able to hire a former Doctor Who to run it. Masters does appear a few times in the series, or bits of him do, and that's not as gross as it sounds. He was most often voiced by Orson Welles up until that actor's death. The Hawaiian estate is in a tiz on several occasions with the idea that Robin Masters may attend his house, but something would almost always crop up at the last minute.
Robin. No. Higgins isn't here.
And then for some reason, Magnum would decide that Higgins was in fact Robin Masters, where the series deliberately forgets all the times it's implied that Magnum and Higgins had personally interacted with Robin Masters.
And who, may I ask, is the man we know and address as Robin Masters?
I don't know. Some little guy with a voice like Orson Welles and a body like Truman Capote.
The Masters estate, known as Robin's Nest, was filled with expensive artworks.
That's terrible.
And the many gadgets collected by Robin Masters. Magnum, for his part, saw no problem in borrowing any of Robin's gadgets for his private investigation work, such as expensive cameras or lenses or his computer.
Secret door.
Hurry, Magnum, or you will forfeit the game.
Magnum's access to the tennis court or the wine cellar was an area of constant friction between him and Higgins. Magnum lives in the guest house on the estate, and as part of his living arrangements, Magnum has use of Robin's garage. There was usually a 4x4 and an Audi 5000 sedan, and of course the red Ferrari, which would be damaged in several crashes over the years and even blown up at one point. There were 3 red Ferraris used in the series, all variations on the 308 model. Robin Masters, being so stinking rich, even supplied a green 308 for his nephew who visited Hawaii for one episode. It's not widely known, though, that the real reason Magnum has to live on the estate is to work off the massive debt for all the damage he's caused to the Ferraris.
This is simply staggering.
Or maybe Robin Masters was angry that Magnum tried to get Higgins to take out a reverse mortgage on Robin's Nest.
Sometimes you amaze me, Magnum, truly. Your intuitive grasp of human nature is so
perceptive.
Pre-adolescent.
With TC, Rick and Magnum all having served together in Vietnam, the show will often show us flashbacks or introduce us to other characters from their tours of duty. One such person from their past, Ivan, a Russian officer who tortured some American POWs, including Magnum and TC. He would turn up in Hawaii with a plan to finish the job. Along the way, he puts a bomb in the Ferrari, which resulted in Mac's death.
Did you see the sunrise this morning?
The end of that 2-part episode sees Magnum legally unable to stop Ivan, which doesn't stop Magnum. Manslaughter machine Magnum does kill a lot of people in the course of the series. It's usually in self-defense or to stop somebody else from being killed. Or maybe he really just doesn't like dolphins. He also doesn't seem to care much for nuns either. Magnum's extrajudicial execution of Ivan really does shake up the viewer's perception of a series that's alternated between a drama and a light and frothy travelogue. You do have to wonder if the coroner in Honolulu had pre-filled forms.
Call me here to kill me too?
All of this death in service of fun and entertainment reminds me of the time Jessica Fletcher accidentally shot Sheriff Tupper and then blamed it on a combination of jet lag and sleeping pills.
Could you conduct an investigation?
I'm not on the case.
The series would evolve very slightly over time. Early seasons have a mix of comedy episodes and serious dramatic shows, while in later years the balance would shift sharply in favour of more dramatic episodes. Every viewer or fan will have their own favourites and less than favourites. Personally, I found there to be a dip in the show's energy around the 4th and 5th year, and somewhat of a resurgence in the last few seasons.
Please don't arrest him, officer. This Magnum impersonation is just some harmless hero worship.
The happy-go-lucky feel of early seasons will be replaced by a darker feel, particularly in the last season. Higgins mellows a lot, his backstory becomes even more absurd than Sean Connery trying to use a smartphone. Hey, should I? And then in later years they quietly ignore much of Higgins' grandiose lineage in favour of the insanity of Thomas Sullivan Magnum.
Are you or are you not Robin Masters?
TC and Rick seem to have accepted that their friend Thomas is always going to lean on their friendships, and they offer less resistance rather than have to deal with the master manipulator Magnum playing his mind games.
Does it ever occur to you to just ask for what you want without any games?
Magnum P.I. would have episodes where the detective story wasn't the absolute focus of an episode. You can often see a crime subplot show up out of nowhere in the last act. Extra points if out of nowhere they can have a car chase, a fist fight, or Magnum shooting somebody.
Hi, guys. I think I can explain everything.
Even then, there are a few occasions where it was just about the characters. Thomas is lost at sea and having to tread water for hours until his friends decide to rescue him. In another episode, Magnum goes on a hike and becomes trapped under the wreckage of a World War II fighter for many hours, during which time Magnum tries to stay lucid as events from his life and thoughts about his current case become a blur. The series wasn't afraid to play around with the style. One episode has Magnum dreaming he's in the 1940s with all his friends playing 40s versions of themselves, then Magnum wakes up and solves that crime in the current day. Later on, an entire show is presented purely as a 40s style noir mystery with the regular cast playing different characters. Then you have episodes with a more supernatural focus. Magnum believes he's seen a child while diving, but turns out their child had died years before, which somehow lets Magnum solve the mystery of the child's death. It's occasionally implied that Magnum can see the ghost of Mac.
And as for you, get lost.
John Hillerman clearly had fun when he was called on to play several of Higgins' half-brothers, Elmo Zeller.
What the hell are you trying to pull?
I want to pull your mustache.
Father Paddy McGuinness.
Bigora. Johnny.
And Don Luis Mongueo.
Dios mío. Oh my God.
Magnum is left a fortune after a rich client is apparently killed. Magnum teaches a class in private investigation.
I'll pay for the beers when we get there.
All right, I'm totally stoked.
Then there are incidents like where a lot of media from the mid-80s, the quartet team up with Robert Forster and go back to win the Vietnam War, or at least a tiny bit of it. But we love the show anyway. One episode is a madcap treasure hunt across the island.
The great private investigator, Thomas Magnum.
Or there was the time Thomas almost received an award for being a good private detective.
You're worrying about your award at a time like this.
No, I'm not. I mean, that's not important now. It's just that...
Or another episode where he's trapped in a bank vault with Carol Burnett's character.
Afraid you have just outsmarted yourself, Mr. Private Investigator.
There's the time Magnum discovers karaoke.
I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree.
We couldn't forget the incident with the bird.
Oops.
One episode in the final season went full on meta, with an episode where Magnum ends up dressed as Indiana Jones searching for the lost art.
I'm truly sorry that you didn't get a chance to locate the lost art.
There were crossover episodes with Simon and later Murder, She Wrote.
I've often wondered how a man of Magnum's limited background has been able to crack so many difficult cases.
As a long-running series, there were bound to be appearances by many of the familiar actors who seem to have appeared in almost every series at one time or another. If they were working in the 1980s, they probably popped up in Magnum P.I. somewhere.
I know.
Sometimes more than once and as different characters. Magnum was a hit show for sure, but no one was really going to turn down a role where they also got a trip to Hawaii as part of the deal. Magnum P.I. would also provide showcases for up-and-coming talent, as well as providing some meaty roles for acting veterans.
What the bloody hell?
Ernest Borgnine showed up. Carol Burnett played a woman who drove Magnum nuts. Frank Sinatra showed up, playing an ex-cop out for revenge.
It's like I won't be able to keep my promise to his parents after all.
Sinatra had bumped into Selleck and Manetti and declared he wanted to be in the show, in what would be one of his last dramatic roles. Magnum briefly became sort of engaged to Dana Delaney's character for a spell. Another time he fell for somebody he thought was a troubled twin, played by Sharon Stone. Another episode has Magnum dating a woman played by Mimi Rogers. Sometimes Magnum would just fall for the wrong woman, despite his rules against dating clients. Magnum was often seen as having an effect on the women of Hawaii, but his character really only dated once or twice a season at best. Magnum was affected by his marriage to Michelle, played by Martha Dubois. Here's where it gets complicated. While on tour in Vietnam, Magnum married a young woman, Michelle, who turned out was still married to a North Vietnamese general, and then she was thought by Magnum to have been killed during the fall of Saigon, and then she turns up in Hawaii with her husband, and then he was killed, so the Navy gave her a new identity, but she would still show up in Hawaii every now and then with her daughter Lily, who may or may not have been Magnum's daughter. Look, I don't see the resemblance myself. On one visit to the island, Magnum is in fact dying in hospital, and his spirit helps save her life.
You can't die. You have to take care of our daughter.
But then she and Lily are killed in a car bomb. And look, we'll talk about the final episode a little later on in this video. Magnum P.I. is known for one of the most iconic theme tunes of any 80s series. However, for the first few episodes, slow funk tune with a big brass line before it heads into what can only be described as a jazzy exploration. However, if you watch early episodes, you'll notice background music by Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, and you'll hear snippets of something quite familiar. So, roughly 2/3 of the way through the first season, Magnum would finally receive its famous theme tune. Mike Post had been a long-time friend of Tom Selleck's. Post and Carpenter would provide most of the original music heard on the series up until Carpenter's death later in the series run. Mike Post and Pete Carpenter together have given us music for the Rockford Files, the A-Team, Hill Street Blues, LA Law, all iconic. But perhaps the A-Team aside, Magnum has one of 1980s television's best air guitar parts. If you ever see a red Ferrari blast past you on the freeway, with its stereo blaring the Magnum P.I. theme, that's a rental.
I suppose you're all wondering how we got into this mess.
In the late 70s, TV producer Glen A. Larson had been developing a Hawaiian-set series about a detective for the American ABC network. When ABC cancelled a few of Larson's shows, he took his ball and went to develop series for their rival, CBS. Around this time, that network's police series Hawaii Five-0 was ending its 12-season run, and so CBS liked the idea of a new Hawaii-based series that could utilise the soon-to-be-available crew and facilities of Hawaii Five-0.
Oops! Passageway blocked.
Damn.
Try again.
Okay. Right.
Larson wrestled with ideas, none of which were named Battlestar Honolulu, Buck Rogers and the Waikiki Hilton, or The Misadventures of Captain Cook. CBS showed some interest in Larson's pitches, particularly if they could get Tom Selleck to star. Selleck had made appearances in shows like The Rockford Files and had made several pilots that did not sell. But at the same time, Selleck did not particularly want to star in Magnum as it was first pitched by Larson, a rather over-the-top detective series featuring a square-jawed hero. Square-jawed Tom Selleck and his reps vetoed the idea of working with Larson as a producer, and so Larson brought on Donald P. Bellisario, who'd previously worked with Larson on Battlestar Galactica.
TC, you mean you'd let me drive out of here broke? Well, that's the way you always drive in.
Tom Selleck apparently doesn't swear. He would never say words like shit, or piss, or fuck, or cassowary fundamental leg ham. But he sure as shit did not like the original script for Magnum, which featured a totally non-ironic, stereotypical heroic lead character.
The guy you hired, and I heard you once, why would you call him Mr. Masters on the telephone when you thought no one else was around?
Selleck liked Bellisario, which made him an acceptable producer choice as far as Team Selleck were concerned. Or is that Team Tom? Or maybe for clarity, if not brevity, Team for the advancement of Tom Selleck. Selleck did not want to play an invulnerable and ridiculously handsome lead. Instead, he wanted to play against the type of role he was usually offered. In Magnum, Selleck wanted to play a fallible character with some humor as well as drama.
Meaning me chasing down 6 ninjas who aren't really ninjas because there's no such thing as ninjas anymore. Or samurai for that matter. Besides, these ninjas who aren't really ninjas could be anywhere.
Don Bellisario reformatted the script, mixing in ideas from a pilot he'd been developing about 3 Vietnam vets in California. Bellisario took on the reins of the project and wrote a script set in Hawaii, a brave move for somebody who'd never been there.
Oh my God!
His idea of Hawaii was based on an old travel book, and when the show went into production, Bellisario wanted to present Hawaii as it was before all the high-rise apartment buildings along the beaches. Indeed, in early years of the show, hotels were rarely featured.
It reminds me of the time I was stranded on an island off the northern coast of Africa.
Even though Magnum was filmed in Hawaii, it was still run from Hollywood, with writers and production staff working on the show in Los Angeles. This is not uncommon, and you'll still see many shows that are made away from Los Angeles, like in Canada or elsewhere, with writers and producers working from an LA base.
What you talking about, Higgins?
It's easier to do now, but in the 80s this was conducted with expensive long-distance phone calls and physically sending scripts via a courier. This did cause a few problems in the show's first few seasons, as only film production crew were based in Hawaii. Any script changes requested by the directors or actors had to be relayed to writers on the mainland, and new scripts physically flown over.
I know what you're thinking, and you're right.
Think about every work email you get in a day, and if each message had to be delivered by snail mail by your postal service. Then imagine your postal worker's back injury every time somebody accidentally replied all to a company-wide email.
I say, Magnum!
Hey guys, does the name Sorensen mean...
Higgins!
This problem was later solved by bringing in a producer based in Hawaii, writer-producer Charles Floyd Johnson, who started bringing writers to Hawaii while their episodes were being made. Later, a story editor type role based in Hawaii was created to help production continue smoothly.
Hey, that's great. That's a really well-considered plan.
Unlike Glen Larson, co-creator Don Bellisario actively oversaw the show for several seasons, contributing scripts along the way. Bellisario's work is notable for a progressive streak that also dealt with military personnel and veterans in particular with sensitivity and compassion.
You're Thomas Magnum, weren't you?
What?
The show was a hit for most of its run, with Selleck and Hillerman each winning an Emmy and a Golden Globe for their roles. Selleck was brought in as a producer in later years, with the 7th year originally set up to be the show's last season. Ratings improved, but at the same time, Selleck had said while he wasn't tired of the show, he was tired from doing the show.
That is absolutely ridiculous.
But that's the whole point, Higgins.
To wrap up the series, an episode, Limbo, was written to tie up loose ends where possible and go out with a bang. In the introduction, Magnum is shot, and while he's in a coma in hospital, his spirit is out and about and able to eavesdrop on his friends' conversations. The only person he's able to talk to is Mac, the actual Mac.
Boy, did we have a good time that night, huh? Well, up to the point where your Ferrari blew up with me in it.
Oh, no.
But Mac was dead, and so that means... oh.
Okay, I'll admit this much. I'm either dead or dreaming.
Michelle and her daughter Lily are also on the island, and Magnum's spirit is able to help her evade men trying to kill her. Look, just go with it. And at the end, Magnum decides he's going to walk towards the light. Yes, like any book about a beloved pet, Magnum dies at the end.
No, there's something else.
However, ending the series at this time and in this fashion didn't sit well with many, and a shorter 8th season was ordered. Magnum returns to life, naturally, but he's deeply affected by his experience in the first few episodes. The man who tried to have him killed is still trying to finish the job. The last season does have some of the series' darkest moments, as in one episode, Magnum's potential killer is acquitted. He sends Magnum a videotape of the car bomb that killed Michelle and Lily. Magnum sets out to assassinate this potential killer during a prisoner exchange. Magnum relents as a way to make his daughter proud of him.
The Great Hawaiian Adventure Company. It's a specialized tour package. We bring the people to Hawaii on your airline at a discounted rate, of course.
The 8th season wraps up everybody's storyline. Rick is to be married, TC has patched up the relationship with his family, and Higgins has a publisher interested in his memoirs. The show kills off Tanaka, gives Carol a featured episode, and then for the final show, a victory lap tries to get everybody in the series in one episode preparing for Rick's wedding. Magnum starts the episode visiting his family before returning to Hawaii, where he reconnects with his grandfather, also Thomas Sullivan Magnum, and puts a budding relationship on hold as he has two things on his mind: a major life change, and he also has doubts over the video of the car bombing.
She's alive.
It turns out Lily did not die and is returned to Thomas.
Papa?
As for his life change,
wedded husband, to love
exactly.
and to honor.
And that was it. That was an episode stuffed with so many goings on that it was hard to see how it would resolve satisfactorily, but by the end, it was a beautiful ending to a show made in an era where television series rarely received an episode to wrap things up.
Good night.
Television?
Well, I used to be, but I found it too demeaning. I just do features now. Movies.
The cast went about their separate ways. Selleck had been starring in films during Magnum's run, and he would continue to star in films, big and small, TV shots, and recurring roles in shows like Friends. Later on, he'd star in police series Blue Bloods, which has run for so many years that they've stopped counting how many seasons it has and just count the rings.
Oh, come on, Mac. Just push the buttons.
Don Bellisario would go on to create Quantum Leap and later JAG, which would morph into the super successful NCIS franchise.
What are you seeing, that geek?
What are you, blind? The man is terminally gorgeous.
The guy talks like he's been sucking helium, and he giggles like a girl.
For many years there was talk of a Magnum movie or a spin-off, but nothing eventuated. I may have just dreamt this, but there was a poor reception to test footage of a Magnum P.I. movie starring Daniel Day-Lewis, but he couldn't do the thing with the eyebrows.
I think I can explain this whole misunderstanding.
No, you can't.
In 2018, CBS, having gotten the bug relaunching reboots of shows like Hawaii Five-0 and MacGyver, added a reboot of Magnum P.I. with Jay Hernandez as Magnum, which, while I don't watch network television very much anymore, I have been following this show and it's fun enough, even if Hot Higgins is a phrase you never thought would enter your thoughts. Both Larry Manetti and Roger E. Mosley made guest appearances on the show as new characters. It had rated very well but was cancelled by CBS after 4 seasons, picked up by NBC for 20 more episodes before being cancelled again, which is ironic when you remember the original series had also ended twice.
Aha!
I will admit, before watching this series for this review, I had never seen an episode of Magnum P.I. I don't ever recall switching over for a minute or so, watching a scene or two. I just have never watched it. Of course I was aware of it, I just never saw it, despite me sitting through dozens of lesser cop shows that decade. I've liked many shows created by either Larson or Don Bellisario, but somehow just Magnum slipped through the cracks. Maybe at the time I was more interested in Britain's answer to Magnum, a glamorous show about a detective driving an unusual car around an island popular with tourists, Bergerac.
Sorry about the mix-up, but you do look like the bunco type.
Thanks. Miss Gordon, I'm sorry I'm late for my appointment. I'm Peters.
But at some point a few years ago I put Magnum on a list of potential series to watch, and it didn't turn out to be quite what I expected. But I am sure glad I made the effort. Then I started watching the reboot series here and there, and I've been enjoying that as well.
I thought you were Burt Reynolds?
Magnum P.I. was one of the longest running series of the 80s. Whether you consider it a detective series, an action adventure, a comedy or a thriller, it was all of the above. It could get silly at times, spooky, quite dark in places, but was enlivened by an always watchable and charming cast, a willingness to explore new areas, and a desire to avoid being another formulaic television series. And did you see, the dude with the mustache drives a Ferrari? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
You know what I told you about Robin Marston?
Yeah.
In sickness and in health.
I lied.